got to be honest with you, no one in Australia cares about the Champions trophies. Well, I've got a Duke's ball here, actually. He was bowling first change with the white Duke's ball early on. At the bottom of my list will be Cameron Akmal. Tournament that's been designed for India to win, to take the trophy back to Ahmedabad, and they will do that. Now they've got the monkey off the back, having won the T20 World Cup.
You are listening to the Cricket Reborn podcast. Beyond the scorecards, beyond the boundaries. From exclusive contents to fresh insights, join us in the sport that we celebrate and breathe. Hello and welcome everyone to the Cricket Reborn podcast. The Champions Trophy is just around the corner, and today we are going to dive into all things Australian cricket. With me, I've got a special guest over here, the voice of Australian cricket summer for ACN 1116 Network, a political science graduate on paper but a cricket broadcaster and journalist in the field, the co-author of Glenn Maxwell's autobiography, The Showman, one of the passionate voices articulating our gentleman's game. And here's you welcome, the protagonist of the Final Word Cricket podcast, Adam Collins, for you. A very warm welcome, Adam.
What a warm welcome indeed. Thank you, Arijit. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for the invitation. Hopefully I can provide some insight for your listeners and viewers today.
Yeah, definitely. The Australian cricket. I think one of the big news that's going on revolving around Australian cricket is the huge setback that they've got. No Pat Cummins, no Mitchell Starc, no Josh Hazlewood. Marcus Stoinis, all of a sudden, he has retired from ODI cricket. There is no Mitchell Marsh as well, so it's quite an amateur kind of a squad that they are going to go with in the Champions Trophy. What do you reckon about it, Adam?
Yeah, it's vastly different to the types of teams that Australia have enjoyed a lot of success with at ICC tournaments in the past. You look at the T20 World Cup in 2022, which they used for the most part their test team. Of course, the 50-over World Cup in 2023 when they humbled India at Ahmedabad Stadium in front of 85,000 people. And of course, the World Test Championship at the Oval earlier in 2023 as well. That was the core team they did it with, and a number of them won't be there, as you identify. Mitchell Marsh, who was outstanding in that T20 World Cup final. Mitchell Starc, who's been a brilliant white ball bowler for Australia for well over a decade. Pat Cummins, who's as tactically astute a captain as is going around in world cricket. And Josh Hazlewood, who was reinvented as a white ball bowler during the pandemic. Unfortunately, injuries have kept him away more than he's been there, but a World Cup winner on a couple of occasions as well. So that's a vast amount of experience you're taking out of that best 11.
Yeah, definitely vast amount of experience taking out of there. But I think one thing where the Australian cricket they might look at it as a blessing in disguise is Stephen Smith is returning as the captain of the team. No Pat Cummins, so which means that we are getting Stephen Smith, who is going to lead the Australian cricket team. Recently, he did fill up Cummins' shoe in a few interim squads against the West Indies, against Pakistan as well, if I'm not wrong, and also in the Sri Lankan series. So, what do you reckon? Smith back as captain? How do you think the scope of things for Australian cricket?
Well, they've got two great options as captain. I wouldn't think that they would see it as a blessing in disguise, as you articulated it before. I don't think they would see it that way. They love playing under Pat Cummins. He's been a very successful leader. If Cummins was fit, he would be captain here. But in saying that, when Smith has pinch hit as captain, especially in Test cricket in the last few years, his record's been sensational. The 2-0 series win in Sri Lanka that only wrapped up this week, where he was player of the series and player of the first Test match, and could have easily been player of the second Test match as well. The Test matches that he's led Australia in Adelaide against England, and I can't remember who the other one was against, maybe the West Indies, and a couple of other opportunities as well, including that famous victory at Indore a couple of years ago where they beat India inside 7 sessions on a pitch that was designed to ruin the Australians' hopes. It was a very calculated pitch, that one at Indore, and Australia managed to win inside 2.5 days under the leadership of Smith as well. So what you've got there is a captain who is most accomplished, and he won't for a moment feel as though he needs to ease himself into the job, having led Australia, I think, in 39 Test matches all up, plenty of white ball cricket as well.
Yeah, definitely plenty of white ball cricket as well. I remember Smith was also the captain in the IPL for the rising Pune Super Giants, and he pipped Mahendra Singh Dhoni, one of the greatest captains of India in that time. So yeah, no doubt on Smith's captaincy. But if we have a quick look at the squad right now of Australian cricket, the current squad, I think plenty of fillers that is used. Tanveer Sangha is back in the mix. Jake Fraser McGurk. The management has backed JFM for the role, despite some failure with the bat in the recent series, in the ODI series. I think against England it was 5-match ODI series they played. Also, a few bowling combinations as well. Sean Abbott is back out here. There's Ben Docius, a domestic legend, who's getting an opportunity for Australian cricket. So, what do you reckon? See, adaptability is a very important thing when you go to the subcontinents. So, with no Cummins, no Hazlewood, no Starc, a young lot player. Not everyone is young. Like I mentioned, Ben Docius, someone like him, he's got plenty of experience. But when I talk about experience, is the experience in playing in those conditions in Pakistan, probably. So, how do you see these things? Also, Spencer Johnson's back.
Right, so there is some experience playing in Pakistan. It's worth remembering that this Australian team went to Pakistan in 2022. A number of them are veterans of that trip. But yeah, you're right in terms of the shake-up to the bowling group. It means that Ben Dwarshuis gets his opportunity. He has been an outstanding bowler in domestic cricket for a long time, got a chance to represent Australia again in England last year and took that and bowled well in the recently completed one days in Sri Lanka too. So they won't be too worried about having him in the starting 11 if it breaks that way. Spencer Johnson, though, would be ahead of him in the pecking order as the standout left arm quick after Mitchell Starc. So I think that's the way that'll shape up. And noting, of course, that Spencer Johnson has been a fairly... look, I was going to say it's been a fairly dramatic rise to the top, but he experienced so many injuries in the younger part of his career. Once his body was right, he felt like he was good to go. A little bit like Patrick Cummins, a generation before that, where Cummins was barely bowling for years. And when he came back as a test cricketer in 2017, he's barely missed a test match through injury since. So that's the Johnson story to a little bit of extent as well. You mentioned Sean Abbott, you name checked him. He's a world champion from 2023, only played one game in that World Cup, but he's got so much experience and he's got a deep bag of tricks. He's probably a little bit lucky to be in the 50-over squad on the basis that he struggled in England last year. However, he's had a very good Sheffield Shield season with New South Wales. He's someone they have a lot of faith in, someone who's been around Australian squads for a long time, including in Sri Lanka in the recently completed Test series. Jake Fraser-McGurk's another name that you throw at me there. It is on the basis of what he did in the IPL last year that he was able to vault himself into the Australian team last year in Scotland and England. It hasn't clicked for him yet. He has had some notable domestic performances in that stretch of time, but none really for Australia as yet. So that's one to watch, whether Fraser-McGurk gets a chance in the starting 11. I tend to doubt it. I think he's more there to continue to develop him as a player in the Australian squad. I don't think he'll end up making the starting 11, although the volatility in the Aussie team, it might well be the case. So there is a number of players, or there are a number of players with experience in Pakistan as well. But as you point out there, complemented by a series of players who wouldn't have been in the first choice squad had things broken the way the Australians wanted them to.
Yeah, very rightly pointed out, Adam. And like you mentioned about the playing 11 a few seconds back. So I'd straight away jump into the playing 11. According to you, what should be the starting 11 for Australian cricket? Like right up there, Travis said partners with Matt Short, or you reckon? Or is it JFM or someone else?
It would be
How do you go about things?
probably Travis Head and Matt Short. I've got to be honest with you. No one in Australia cares about the Champions Trophy. So the level of
Very
understanding of where the pieces will fit, the Australian audience will pay attention, and I think the wider public, the only audience is paying attention to this tournament. Pakistan because they're hosting it, and India because the tournament's been tailored for an Indian victory. So around the world, best 11s and who fits in where, that'll be sort of as people get nearer the first game, and probably when the first game's been played, there'll be stronger opinions on that. At the moment, I don't think people are emotionally engaged with this. So I don't think the Australian 11 would have necessarily been decided as yet. But what I do know is that Smith is captain, Travis Head opening the batting. I think Matt Short, on the basis of what he achieved in the Big Bash League for the Adelaide Strikers, will be another good option there. Glenn Maxwell, as ever, in that middle order. The aforementioned fast bowlers, Spencer Johnson and Sean Abbott, all the experience of Adam Zampa with his outstanding leg spin. They have got a lot of players who pick themselves.
Yeah, and not to forget Manas Labuschagne. I think he's one of those important batter in the middle order.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
he was in the 23 World Cup. So Labuschagne wasn't in the original squad in the 23 World Cup. He got
yeah,
brought in later in the piece. He wasn't set to be there. He got brought in as an injury replacement, then played something like 17 one-day internationals in a row, including that half century at Ahmedabad in front of, as I said before, I think it was 85,000 was the capacity that day.
yeah.
And Labuschagne stood up batting there with Travis Head. So they've got him in the middle as the glue with Steve Smith on tracks that in all probability in Pakistan will be very high scoring and very flat early on. And as we get deeper into the tournament, as the tracks take more traffic, as they end up being more spin friendly, they'll want players in the middle order like Labuschagne with lots of experience.
Quite rightly mentioned. And one of the interesting aspects that you brought about, Adam, is that the importance of Champions Trophy. I think, like you mentioned, nobody actually cares in Australia about the Champions Trophy at the moment. Like until they play the first match, very rightly pointed out. Maybe it's Pakistan, maybe it's India. Yeah, the hype is always here in cricket when it comes to in India, in the subcontinent especially. But what are your view? Champions Trophy, it's coming, it's returning after 8 years. Like initially when it began in 1998, there was always a 2 year span, and we could see Champions Trophy. Slowly, the gap expanded. It got 3 years from 2006 to 2009. Then 2009 to it went to 2013. That is 4 years
Mm.
gap. Then 2013 to 17 again in 20 after 2017. It took 8 years for the Champions Trophy to return. In 2025, do you see the evolving T20 cricket or the franchise league cricket playing a role because we fit it in the schedule?
Well, look, there's a reason why they've tried to kill the Champions Trophy off a couple of times, and it's because of the congested schedule. So in 2017, that was a stunning final at the Oval. I was there for that when Pakistan annihilated India. I think the view was that would be the final Champions Trophy. It wasn't built into the next FTP. But the reason it's come back is that they've made a decision that they want to have a major men's ICC tournament every year because it's a cash cow. And that makes sense. So you've got the 50 over men's World Cup, 2 T20 World Cups, remembering that the last time the Champions Trophy was played for in 17, the 20 over World Cups were in 4-year increments. There was a 20 over World Cup in 16. There wasn't scheduled to be another men's tournament till 2020. That got pushed out to 2021 due to the COVID pandemic. So they kind of flipped that and turned it into a 2-year cycle, which I think makes sense in 20 over cricket. And they want to have a 50 over tournament every other year. So 23 for the World Cup, which has more teams, and it's a great thing, and 8 teams in the Champions Trophy. Instinctively, I like it. I like the idea of a short tournament that brings together the best players in the world across a couple of weeks, 2 groups of 4, straight into it, bim, bam, bosh. I think it's a nice thing to be able to put into the calendar. The challenge, of course, is where the players fit in. So we'll get a pretty good idea, I think, over the next few weeks, just how invested the players are or otherwise. The World Cup has always been the trophy that teams wish to win. The Champions Trophy has been a secondary tournament. As you say, it started off in the late 90s as being the ICC Knockout Trophy and other different variants on that, and it didn't have a huge amount of cut through. It did in 17. I covered the tournament in 2017 as England were on their way to a home World Cup in 19. So there was that additional context with with England, the best white ball team in the world, according to the rankings in 17.
In that phase.
And then in that phase, that's right. And then the final where Pakistan, who only just snuck through to the semis by the skin of their teeth, had a spectacular final with Fakhar Zaman, and then that spell from Muhammad Amir running through India in their reply. So it was a very watchable tournament. It was a very exciting elimination stage. And I hope that the tournament's just as engaging this time. My fear is that it might take a little bit of time for people to warm up to it, and it hasn't got that long. It's a short tournament, right? There's 15 or 16 games. So the thing going for it is that there's no clashes. There's games every day. They're all starting at the same time of day, and the vast majority of them are being played at the same couple of grounds in Pakistan, with the notable exception of the compromise that India has negotiated for Dubai. Every other game's being played across a couple of grounds in Pakistan. So it won't take long for, I think, viewers at home to start to get a sense of what's going on, which is what you want in a tournament like this. So you have that kind of emotional buy-in.
But I also feel that, by the time the people sense that something, the Champions Trophy is going on, it might come to its Q end, because there are, I
Maybe.
think, 12 matches in the group stages and 3
Yeah.
semi-final, 2 semi-final and 1 final. So 15 games and
It
done and
could.
dusted.
It could. It'll hinge on how well India does. So if India are doing well, it'll generate a lot of attention, and they will do well. They're the overwhelming favourites here, and they've got the added advantage of all of their games being played in a neutral venue, which will essentially be a home game for them. And if India are doing well, it'll obviously generate loads of attention. We're producing episodes of The Final Word daily, every single day, from over in Dubai and Pakistan, and we'll be producing those stumps every night. We're fully invested in the tournament, and we're acutely aware that how well our podcast does will be influenced by how well India do. And I know they don't have Bumrah at their disposal, which is a real shame, but that Indian 50-over team was so magnificent through the 2023 World Cup. It made their loss in the final all the more staggering. And if they play anywhere close to their potential, they will be in those elimination stages, and therefore it will have huge attention around the world.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely, it will be having a huge attention. And right, I'd like to bring an important point, like Adam Collins mentioned over here, the Final Word podcast, the banner you can see right behind him. Make sure to follow his podcast and make sure to subscribe to the podcast. I am a regular listener to Adam Collins, and the guys are the Bharat Sundaresan, Geoff Marsh, if I'm not wrong. So they are doing a fantastic job, to be
Thank you.
honest. And I think everyone needs to keep an eye over there as well. Yeah, right back. Moving on, Adam. One last question before we move to our next segment, and that is a little bit fun-based segment. The question is, who do you think will be the X factor for Australian cricket in this Champions Trophy team?
Good question. I think that what you're seeing in the Aussie 50-over team is a team in transition. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the younger guys. Even though Matt Short isn't young, he's been around for a long time. He hasn't got loads of international experience. So it's a great platform for someone like him. He'll be the player who naturally gets chances when Glenn Maxwell doesn't play 50-over cricket anymore, because of the way that he is able to bowl very useful overs of off spin in addition to what he does with the bat. I'm not saying they'll bat in the same slot, but you know what I'm trying to say, having a dynamic right-handed batter who bowls off spin. So if you're looking for that group of players who don't always play in the Aussie teams, I think that someone like Matt Short's nicely positioned and has had a good run of it in the Big Bash of late, playing for the Adelaide Strikers and captaining that team in the Big Bash League. So I would say out of the players who are less well known, I'd say Matt Short would be the one to watch.
All right, Matchard. I also feel that Travis Head is really going to have a blast this season because those batting friendly wickets, I think he's someone at the top who can give them the momentum. All
Yeah,
right.
I think Travis said it in the elimination stages, in the games that matter most. I don't know who Australia are playing in the group stage, but whoever they're playing, if they make it to the semi-finals and the final, that is when Travis Head will come into his own. We saw that in the 2023 World Cup when he was able to put a massive dent in that chase of 213 against South Africa in the semi-final, and that extraordinary performance to silence Ahmedabad in the 2023 World Cup final when he single-handedly took down India. So if you're looking for someone, and he did the same thing in the Border Gavaskar match-winning 100 at Adelaide, and an innings that was just as dynamic in Brisbane with another century, and of course that he was there at the end in that fourth innings run chase in Sydney. So if it gets to the pointy end and it's Australia against India, Head will be the guy who all eyes turn to.
Yeah, definitely. We as Indian fans, we cannot forget Travis Head because what he has done
No.
over here. So right then, it was a lovely session, Adam. But before we wrap things off, I just like to sign things off with a prediction from your end. Since this was all about the Champions Trophy, so
Yep.
your top four for the Champions Trophy, the runners-up, and the champions. Who do you think?
India won't lose a game. They will turn that Dubai Stadium into a fortress. No one will get near them. It's a tournament that's been designed for India to win, to take the trophy back to Ahmedabad, and they will do that. Now they've got the monkey off the back, having won the T20 World Cup last year, effectively getting a home World Cup in Dubai, which is what it'll feel like in India, in the UAE. My apologies. We'll slant it dramatically in their favour, remembering the final will be in Dubai. If they make it as well. So that puts India at an overwhelming structural advantage. I'd be staggered if they don't win every game in the tournament. And from there, look, I'd throw a blanket over 5 or 6 of them. I don't expect Australia will be at the pointy end of this tournament. If they get through to the semis, it'll take something special. I wouldn't be surprised if Afghanistan make the final 4. They've got Australia and England in their group. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Afghanistan beat both Australia and England, which they nearly did in 2023. They beat England, and they should have beat Australia if not for Glenn Maxwell and what he did from 7 for 91 and that unbeaten 201 not out. So I think Afghanistan will make the final 4. And on the other side of the draw, who do India take through with them as the second team? Probably Pakistan as the home side. So Pakistan will get slaughtered by India in Dubai, even though, of course, Pakistan beat India in Dubai the last time they played. But it'll feel very, very different in a 50-over game set up that way. But the other 2 group games being at home, that should be enough of a home ground advantage for Pakistan to get through to the other semi-final. So I reckon it'll be the India and Pakistan from one side of the draw, Afghanistan, and one of Australia and England. Whoever wins that game will go through as the second qualifier as the semi-finalist. And who will make the final? In that world, it'll be India. I'm going to have Afghanistan as my top seed. So India playing Australia/England, they'll win that game. Afghanistan playing Pakistan. Why not? Why not live a little? I reckon Afghanistan will beat Pakistan in the semi-final, just as they did in the 2023 World Cup. And then we'll have an India-Afghanistan final, which will make some people very upset and other people very happy.
Oh, that's a bold prediction. That's a bold prediction, Adam. I
Why
think
not? Predictions count for nothing, so I'll say whatever you want.
exactly. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. I hope you were entertained as much as I was with Adam Collins. And yeah, a lovely soul to talk to, and especially when it comes to the cricket. And yeah, ensure to follow Cricket Reborn. Ensure to subscribe the channel. And yes, last but not the least, the Final Word podcast banner you can see right behind Adam Collins. Tune in, Spotify, YouTube channel. Make sure to follow them. They are doing a fantastic job in cricket.
Thank you,
Anything you would like
Arijit.
to say?
No, you've summed it up nicely there. Thank you for your interesting questions and your interest in the podcast and the Champions Trophy. Let's hope it's a huge success as a tournament. Hopefully, I'm sure it's mostly Indian fans watching. I'm sure you'll enjoy watching India do really well at that competition. And you'll be able to follow every single game on the Final Word Cricket podcast. We've got representatives in Dubai, representatives in Pakistan for the podcast, and that show will come out about an hour after play every night. So tune in, subscribe on YouTube, hit the bell, and listen to the podcast feed as well. Take us with you throughout the course of the Champions Trophy on the Final Word Cricket podcast.
Thank you so much, guys. No better definition, no better conclusion than what Adam could have done. Thank you so much.